joined again by the wonderful Zackery Torres, an incredible, talented, wonderful dancer, and at USC Kaufman, the wonderful, iconic USC Kaufman.
Right on,
um,
yes.
Good. And also the founder and CEO of Continuum Community. And as of today, an author. So I'm so excited to be talking about Zachary's new book. Um, but before we jump in, can you just kind of give us a rundown, maybe for people who weren't able to tune in last time, about what is Continuum? Uh, you know, why did you start it? What's its mission?
Absolutely. So, hello everyone. Welcome back. Thanks for working with us with those technical issues. Technology sometimes is not our friend. But I'm super excited to be here again. Second time I'm getting the chance to talk with Ellie about Continuum. So, I started Continuum because I started advocating on a local level in regards to gender inclusivity. And I really wanted to provide as many resources that were easy to understand and practical that help communities evolve to be better. And so that was the mission of the company. And that is also the mission of our first guidebook, which is called An Evolving Conversation on Gender Dance Edition. So, first work I've ever published, which is wild to me that I published a book as of today. It's brand new. I'm super excited. And we also are rolling out a series of videos right now that are all about gender inclusivity. We have some a little bit about, it's one called Who, What, and Why, and it's a little bit about what the company is, what we stand for, and why we're doing what we're doing, as well as we have a first things first video, which breaks down sex and gender, the difference between the two because they are not the same, sexual orientation and pronouns, which are really hot topics at the moment. And then also we just released a video this morning called I Wrote a Book, which really outlines what an evolving conversation on Gender Dance Edition entails and what can be expected from purchasing this book via Amazon. And next week we have more videos coming out about inclusive language, and so we're just trying to do as much as we can to really invite people into this conversation when it comes to gender identity and gender inclusivity, because these conversations are just so important. And I've seen such success in my local community when they're given practical resources. So I just want to make sure that they're available for as many people as they can be.
Amazing. Thank you. Yes. So we're going to talk about this book. First off, why did you write it?
Oof, that's a good question for the big why. Why did I write this? So I wrote this book because I was just so inspired by well, let's start from the beginning. Okay. So I started taking a lot of legal communication classes at USC, which I was super inspired by. And I was like, I really love learning about the law. And then I started taking an advocacy class. It was called Argumentation and Advocacy. And I was super excited. And I was like learning some skills. I was like, I feel like I can actually start advocating for what I believe in. And then that's when I started noticing that a lot of communities weren't built to include people who identify outside of the binary like myself. And so I was like, ooh, I can use the skills I'm learning in school to actually shape my community. What a concept, using education. And then I realized that I really wanted to start making moves. And then I started shaping Kaufman at USC. And I was like, I think I could really write something that's concise, that's easy to understand, that at least gets the ball rolling when it comes to gender inclusivity. And so that's really why I wrote it, is because I was just so inspired by everyone's willingness to learn. They just didn't have the resources. So I wanted to make sure that I could use my annoying obsession with practicality and organization to provide those resources.
Yeah, amazing. I understand the obsession with organization.
Yeah,
Um,
totally.
um, so will you take me, well, I already had the pleasure to read it, but will you take those watching and those who will join the stream or, get to catch up on the stream later, take us through the book. How is it broken down?
Totally. So it opens up with a introductory thoughts from the author. So I wrote a little letter about just kind of what it was like growing up for me and kind of where these conversations started, where were they absent. Talked a little bit about my endeavors being on TV when I was younger and kind of how that shaped me growing up into like who I am today. I think that's probably the most personal part of the book. It's not super long. It's just I think of it a little bit as like an introductory letter. And then we move into section 1, which is first things first. And it talks about things like then that's when it talks about sex and gender, sexual orientation and pronouns, because I think in order to have these conversations, we all have to have a communal understanding of the topics that we're talking about. So that's kind of like the intro, hence why it's called First Things First. And then section 2 is include on a practical note. Oh my gosh, I'm like literally thinking about this book. I'm like, I've read this 1,000 times. I'm like struggling. Section 2 is on a practical note, and it talks about administrative responsibility, inclusivity in the studio, inclusivity in rehearsals, and then also inclusive facilities, which are all very important topics to be talking about when we talk about gender inclusivity, especially in a dance setting. And then we have section 3, which is my personal favorite, which is the implementation guide, which really breaks down like step by step what you can do to be better. And if you're an instructor or a teacher, it's really about like what language can you use? How do you start class? How do you collect pronouns? How do you respect pronouns? And then there's some little language guides in there that I think are really helpful for teachers. This guidebook really focuses on ballet and classical ballet partnering. I think, again, these can be applied to like so many different forms of dance, but those are like where I saw most of the exclusive environments and also where my life practice, I feel like, is most sufficient. So I feel like I could comment on that a little bit more. And then it rounds out with last remarks, which is just a little bit about what you can do, which is basically me just telling you to get in the studio or get in the office and start having these conversations because, again, they're so important. And I would love to just call in as many people as possible to make sure that we're evolving our communities, one local community at a time, because I think that's really how change happens.
Yeah. And I am not a dancer. I am certainly not a ballerina. No one wants to watch me dance.
No.
But um, but I found that it was still helpful and still eye-opening for anyone. So, you know, a lot of what you talk about can totally be taken out of the dance context and
Yeah.
even just the very general ideas. So I really loved how, and you have, and I should, I should have it open, but you have like these charts that are really helpful of, what are maybe some honestly antiquated ways to
Yeah.
communicate with students or with, dancers. Like here, have a break down a chart of like what we can move to have that inclusive language in the studio. But I feel like that's totally going to be applicable to other situations. You just kind
Yeah.
of, right?
Yeah, totally. I
So
mean, literally,
exciting.
we just got in a question from Stephanie. Thank you. It's literally says, can the information be applied in other creative arts studios, or is this book specifically pointed towards dance? And I mean, like coincidentally, we were answering it as she was coming in, so she's ready. I assume, my bad. They were assumed, but yeah, no, I think it's definitely applicable to all forms of like art. I feel like it could be really applicable to theater, but I also just really want to emphasize too that even though right now Continuum Community is really focusing on dance communities because that is my lived experience, it is so important to me that people realize that we are so willing to help evolve all communities. I've even been reached out by dentist offices and doctors' offices that are like, we would love for you to come in and help us figure out how, like, as nurses, we can chat with, how be more inclusive. How do we ask pronouns from our patients? Like, seriously, this information it's important in all aspects, in all fields. So I just think it's so
Yeah.
important to, do that. So yeah, thanks for asking that, Stephanie.
Yeah, that's incredible. And perhaps a second book we might have.
Yeah,
I
seriously.
don't
I mean,
know.
I have so many ideas. I'm like, I need to slow down, but I definitely could see some future publications coming. So hopefully.
Yes, we're not going to jump the gun, but
Yeah.
this is out literally today, so we might take
Yeah,
a
I'm
minute,
like,
but
maybe
I
we
can't
sit in
wait
this
to
one.
see what's next. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
totally.
Something I found really interesting was your title, An Evolving Conversation on Gender. Why did you choose that language for the title?
Yeah, totally. I just feel like that title isn't fixed. I think it's really important that these conversations are always evolving because every day I wake up, I learn something new. I'm still practicing on how I, as a person, can be more gender inclusive because learning is everyone has so much learning to do. And when I hear the words continuum or community, or I hear evolving, I see growth. I don't think it's fixed. I don't think it's like, oh, this conversation is done. I think it's really a symbol for us just being able to constantly be moving forward and growing as a community. And I feel like there's so much possibility and so much knowledge out there, and I learn from my peers and my peers learn from me, and I just really think that's what it's about.
Yeah, absolutely. I really love that idea too. Um, Especially because I feel like that's something so important when we talk about this subject is that, if you're immediately like people who are doing it wrong, 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 how are you going to get those people on your team? How are you going to, how are you going to
Yeah,
teach them if it's just like it's this evolving conversation that you learn in steps, which I
yeah,
think is
totally.
really, yeah, that's something I've learned, I think, from you, from our last interview, and just from following Continuum, which at Continuum Community underscore on
Yeah,
Instagram must be followed,
yeah,
required.
yeah,
Uh,
yes,
um, so I think that something that is true with anything that is, you know, talking about societal change. I think there's that thing of, is this actually possible? Can something actually be done? And I in the book, I really love that you bring up this topic because it's very important in my opinion. And you say yes, and you give the example of the title Miss. Can you take us through that example? Because I feel like that's such a great reflection.
yeah. So some of the biggest pushback I have gotten when talking about like they them pronouns or the title, the gender neutral title of MX, is that people are like, we're not going to change. Like these are rooted in so many old like fashion things, like our society, like that's too much. It's like out of the ordinary, all that stuff. And my biggest answer is if you look at history and you look at the facts and how things have evolved, like we are always growing as a society. And even the title MS. So if you're unfamiliar, it's like Mrs. MRS period is, and then there was MS, and people were saying like, oh, we don't want to be women didn't want to be um, feel like they had to define themselves based on whether or not they were married or single. And so they started the title MS, which is period and just means that's the title for women and whatever. So I just really think it's important that these people realize that there is so much growth. Like that had so much pushback. I was talking to someone I hold so dearly, and she was saying, yeah, that title was not even widely accepted until like the later 20th century, and it was created so long before. So it's wild that now we don't even think twice about that title. And at the time, people were so confused and set back by it. So I just use that as an example to show that it is so possible to grow. It is so possible. The way society gets stuck is by people saying, "Oh, that's not gonna work. We're afraid to change." No, it's totally possible, and that's why I've been super inspired to keep this work going because it starts here, but this work is gonna continue way long after Continuum is over or we pass on or whatever. It's an evolving conversation that's going to keep on going and growing. So
Right. Um, yeah, absolutely. I wanted to ask, so just as a sneak peek, everyone has to buy this lovely book on Amazon, sorry, out today, which is so exciting. Can you give
yes.
us, for the listeners at home, like a sneak peek of one of the examples you give for studio, owners and teachers? But I'm arguing we'll have a greater, reach a greater audience too.
Yeah, totally. One of the examples I love to use are gendered ballet classes. So something that's really rooted in dance culture and in ballet culture is that they always separate training when dancers get to a certain age, it's always okay, the women go to their class and then the men go to their class. And I just don't feel like a binary split class belongs in any sort of inclusive environment. So I have proposed, and I'm not the first one to come up with this, but what we talk about in the book is that it's really important that we look at the skills that those dancers are focusing on, not the gender. Because, I mean, right then and there, when you separate men and women, it's very clear that if I don't identify as a man or a woman, what class would I go to? And it's more so, let's look at the skills in those classes. So it's totally feasible to teach point work and teach variations that are historically performed by female bodies, and teach those because, I mean, again, we're not trying to completely dismantle ballet. It's just how do we evolve it with our society so that it can still grow. So it's not about the gender. It's really about the skills. And then that way the dancers can choose which classes to go to based on the skills that will best equip them for their professional careers. So I helped at Kaufman. We degendered our ballet classes, and now I go to Allegro and Turns class, which focuses on variations that were historically performed by male bodies. And so I know that if I'm going to go and perform, that's probably where I'm going to go because that's what I've been training in. So I really encourage people to start degendering their ballet classes because it's just so not necessary. It's really just about the skills because I use an example in the book. Like if you go to the New York City Ballet, you don't know that the ballerina on stage, you don't know if that dancer actually identifies as a woman. You just know that they are portraying a woman ballerina on that stage. So I think it's
Right.
really important that we offer safe spaces for all these people to train.
Right. Just like with theater,
Absolutely.
we're not seeing, roles constricted by gender identities or racial identities. And as a result, we're seeing such wonderful creations, just having such a positive impact.
Yeah,
Um,
totally.
yeah. Um, Oh, I wanted to read a quote that I thought was so powerful, and just as a little, also a sneak peek. Hopefully, we're not giving too much
No,
away.
you're good. You're good.
Um, but you say, if we're always telling children to be themselves, why would we limit their gender identities? And you kind of talk about how there's this, that's kind of just like a hypocrisy that you've come in contact with. Um, and I imagine that that's that it's so powerful and it's so simple and so true. And I imagine there's just a lot of hypocrisy when we talk about issues like this. So I really loved that quote. I thought it was
Thank
really
you.
powerful.
I love talking about like it's the people. I did a panel recently and they asked like what inspires you to keep going, and honestly it's just kids. Like I've already grown up. I mean, I have a lot of growing to do, trust me. We've got a lot of growing and developing to do. I'm only 21, but I've gone through school and I'm finishing up my undergrad and grad degrees right now, and it's like I've gone through a lot of this stuff, but it's like when you look back at like the little kids that are running around at the park and my family, I look at kids, I'm like, there's so much hope for the world to be just so much better for them than it was for us. And I think that's how we have to look at every generation, you know? We're just here to better so that our kids can then grow in an even better society. Like it has been my biggest dream, honestly, is to have kids. And I'm so excited to have kids. My mom always tells me, slow down, like, don't rush. I'm like, I want kids, but I just think it's so important because like my goal is like I want to shape the world to be better so that the kids that I will have and for all kids it's just better. And so that quote really sticks out to me too because I always whenever I'm having a really hard day or I'm exhausted or I'm tired, I'm like I can't do this anymore. I just think like it's for the kids. You know, it's not for me. It's for the kids. So that's interesting that that quote stuck out for you because that's really kind of like what I really that's kind of my guiding principle as of recent is we do it for the kids.
Yeah, so wonderful. Thank you. Um, I guess I just kind of want to, if we zoom out a little bit, um, what what are some things people can do? Just more generally, some context for people who might not know. What's some good advice?
I have one that I'm thinking of right now actually because I I'm just gonna jump in. I feel like
Yeah,
what
please.
people can do is just recognize that it's okay to not know everything. And it's okay to be new to a conversation. And it's okay to welcome yourself into these conversations because we want these conversations to be had. And it's okay if you have no experience. If you're like, I literally have no clue, just make one step. I said this in the last live. Find where you learn. Is it books? If it is, buy my book. If it's not, if it's videos, go watch Continuum's videos, find, maybe it's not Continuum. I'm not going to hate you if you find a better resource. Like there's so much out there. Like find your way to call yourself in because being a beginner is not a crime as long as you're willing to learn. And I always bring it up too. And also, I think what everyone can do is admitting like, oh, we've messed up in the past. I've messed up in the past. Something that I still am really trying to work through is not assuming pronouns based on names. I did it in this live earlier. I assumed a common's pronouns, and that's something that we have to be better about. And it's okay to admit that, oh crap, I screwed up. It's okay. Call yourself into the conversation to grow. And I think that's absolutely the biggest thing we can be doing as a community right now is showing empathy and welcoming people into conversations because it's so important. It's so important. So I guess
Right.
I don't know, that was kind of a rant, but I think to answer the specific question, what can you do is learn and find your resources and don't be afraid to be a beginner and admit when you made a mistake.
And buy this book.
And buy this book.
And the next book and the next book.
Yeah.
Um, so so let's just one more time. We can buy this on Amazon. Search this title. Search your name. I'm sure it will come
Yeah.
up as well. We'll put the link in. I'll put it in all the comments across wherever this is streaming, so people can check it out also there. Um, and yeah. So is there any other closing things before we wrap up? Are we missing anything?
I think we've really just I just love having these combos, and I really thank you, Ellie, for always being such a great moderator too and interviewer. And I love doing lives with people because live streams without people can get really dry. I've been doing them all day, so I really thank you for doing that. And to everyone who's watching now, and to everyone who will watch after the fact, we're calling you in. It's your time. It's time to join the conversation. Continuum slogan is don't get left behind, join the continuum. We're not going anywhere. This conversation is not going to slow down, especially if I have anything to do with it. It's all about growing, and it's time that we grow and grow. And guess what? That we grow. So we have to be better and we have to hold each other accountable. So just start and just join us and be a part of our community. And I just cannot wait to hear the feedback on the book because, again, we all have learning to do. So I'm so excited about it. And I'm just so excited to keep this conversation going because it is so important.
Yeah. And one thing I did forget to mention before we wrap up, something I found that was absolutely incredible in this is you give us a template of a letter to write to, and again, it's based on a dance studio, but can be very easily edited for any other kind of space. And so not only is it join, it's okay to make mistakes. It's really easy. There's this
Yeah.
lovely guide. It's
Yeah.
incredible. Thank you so, so much for joining me. It's always such a pleasure to talk to you. I can't wait to talk about your next book, whatever
Yeah.
that is.
We will
Um,
see.
and they can find you at Continuum Community _ on Instagram. Your Instagram is at Zackery _ Torres. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And yes, thank you so much for joining me. Everyone go buy this book, dancer or not.
Yeah, seriously, I really appreciate it. And also, too, I guess I will add one last thing I forgot to mention is we also are hoping to do some consulting as well. Continuum is totally open to, we have workshops that we can do. We have curriculum that we'd love to start teaching for community. So if you read the book and you're eager for more, reach out because we would love to help and consult your businesses and your organizations on how to be better. So again, thank you so much, Ellie. I really appreciate it.
Amazing. All right. Thank you. Best of luck. Everyone buy this book.
Everyone, thank you for
I
tuning in.
just got a text that someone bought it. Good
Oh,
stuff.
yay!
All right.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Of course, thank you, Ellie.
Bye.